multi-dimensional world in itself. And if you look at individual countries, China had to put itself back together after World War II. It was fractionalized, had several colonial masters, and really had to conceive of a China that they could go forward with. India did the same thing after its dissecting by the British into a colonial vassal state that was scattered and decentralized and decentered. So when we look at Africa and we look at other parts of the world, we see the need for the same kind of transition. And Africa needs to put itself back together from the Berlin Conference and from what happened at the Berlin Conference to a place where it is a operating structure. I have been privy enough through my own journalistic endeavors for many years, going back to the 60s. I remember when the Algerian revolution, and you had a group of states in the northern part of Africa, Egypt, Tunis, and Morocco for that matter. And then I also remember the southern African states, the Patriotic Front, the movement to align in southern Africa to develop as well. Nigeria certainly has stood its own and has created a tremendous market in having a population now centered in Nigeria of over 250 million people or so. That is major accomplishments have happened on the continent. I do not, however, dismiss what is going on in Sahel right now. I think it is advantageous because it is movement, whether it is along the lines of what others may expect as being acceptable in terms of how it democratically or did not democratically transition. It still has created a better situation for the people of Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger and Guinea as well. So we have to look at the end result and understand that we're not going to always like how these machinations happen on the continent, how these countries are evolved and how they come together, but and learn to work together in better ways. But it is going to be something that we're going to have to live with and accept for their base and final result. So I applaud what is going on in the Sahel from that standpoint.
Thank you for your viewpoint on this very pertinent question. Coming back to you, Mr. EZENWA, there is need, of course, to revolutionize governance, and we are contextualizing it with Africa. And in our preamble, we highlighted the launch of the African School of Governance. And you in your previous discourse, you highlighted the failures that African governments have actually recorded so far. So now, with this new impetus that has set in terms of Africa's global standing, it was applauded some months, I think in 2024, when the president of Sierra Leone actually made a case for Africa at the United Nations Security Council, and actually it showed some positive results. Now let's try to see how this School of Governance will be a platform that will help to revolutionize ideologies and governance system that align with the principles of democracy that is contextualized for the benefit of the African continent.
Well, thank you, Clarisse. For me, a disempowered population may not be as may not critically contribute what it should, the way it's being painted. And when I mean a disempowered population, I mean when you look at the poverty indices in most of Africa, Nigeria, and the rest of them, you see that this population cannot really contribute effectively and efficiently to the kind of proposal that the colleague is putting forward. I am more interested in a situation in which we have leaders in Africa that are truly governing their people, empowering them to be able to make contributions. While we have set up the platform that you are talking about in Rwanda, African Governance School, but the majority of your population still want to go to school in France, they want to go to school in the United States, they want to go to school in UK. And what are they being taught? They are being taught the worldview of the colonizers. And so it is still a situation in which your population is still being modeled within the worldview of those who made them slaves, who carted away their raw materials and returned those raw materials to them as finished products. Now, what has happened is that they are creating new scholars that will defend the ideology of the oppressor. And so the MITs of this world, the Oxfords, all of those places where you are taught, clearly about how, to govern your people within the prisons of those who colonize your own people. So autonomous thinking, autonomous patriotic thinking is lacking, not necessarily because the people of Africa are incapable of that level of thinking, but because more and more we are creating what Fanon, called black man in white man in black skin, and for me that has been the crux of the matter, and nothing has also exacerbated the condition much more than the intrusion of NGOs, the non-governmental organizations who are in one breath mounting human rights democracy, and this human rights and the democracy has become a business funded by the same, EU, USAID, and the rest of them, and creating new scholars within the framework of those NGOs who are also now ideologizing the people of their continent who should be able to rise up to resist some of these things that we are talking about. So in my view, a disempowered people, economically, educationally, scientifically, cannot make any serious contribution to a multipolar world. So it is first important that we are able to engage leadership in Africa, if that is the focus of our conversation, to be able to be in a situation in which they can, at least, if they are not at par with the US and Britain today, they can play where India, where the Chinese, where most of the new emerging Asian economies are playing through governance within their own place. And that for me is the focus. That's why I talked about ideology, not necessarily in terms of whether it's socialist, whether it is capitalist, but in terms of African thinking and thoughts that are original in a way that it can strengthen and empower our people to be able to confront and think.
Very imperative. It's about adopting new narratives that meet the aspiration or the change, the present times, understanding also the dire needs of the population. I think that is very crucial. And now this brings us again to the question. The major question goes to emerging powers. With you, HARLEY SCHLANGER, you quite in your preamble highlighted the the active role of BRICS, or let's just say global South nations, and we can to an extent touch the Arab countries that have been very instrumental in economic and developmental frameworks across the African continent, across the global world. And also when we go to the United States of America with the foreign policy stance of President Donald Trump, a whole lot of questions are arising as to what we should expect in the world of multipolarity, and it brings us to a major challenge for the emerging nations and global, the BRICS nation as a coalition. So let's try to understand some of these, the frameworks that the BRICS nations can put together, BRICS plus, I beg your pardon, can put together that will help solve be it the ideological problem, the economic problem, or geopolitical problems, which we are not very visible to countries, but thanks to advancement in technology and the internet, it is actually very obvious that there is already awakening in how the global setting is, and it is imperative to contextualize to help countries thrive in the sphere of international relations.
Well, I can tell you, sitting here in Germany and watching the reaction of the Western political establishment to seeing Presidents Putin, Xi, and Prime Minister Modi shaking hands at the Shanghai Conference, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the idea that you have these powers now that are committed to this idea of multipolarity. And this is the big change in the world. You know, the idea of breaking the unipolar system has been there since the end of World War II. The Bandung Conference in 1955, for example, there were very excellent ideas about how to break from the having to choose between the Soviet Empire and the Western Empire, but there wasn't a mechanism to do that. What BRICS has done, including the expansion, bringing in Ethiopia and the United Arab Emirates and a few other countries, African countries, is to show to the world that this is a serious operation, and that the BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the two of them, actually have a larger percentage of global GDP than the G7. And so there's now an established basis for trade, for cooperation, and so on. So this is the question now. It really brings up this question of urgency, because I don't think this transitional period will go on indefinitely. I think if you look at the crazy reaction sometimes from Trump, you know, sometimes he's got interesting ideas, and then he turns around and says that China's trying to destroy the dollar. China's not trying to destroy the dollar. The dollar is being destroyed by Western bankers. So the question then is to find, as all of us have been saying, the leadership in Africa, in Latin America, in South Asia, that will orient toward the idea of these new multilateral institutions and bring about the change in thinking that's incumbent on that. And I think that's where we have an opportunity that we didn't have in the past. And the fact that China has become such a significant economic power, India also, Indonesia's on the rise, Nigeria, you know, you have this potential, but the idea of institutional framework for it, so that it's all in one as opposed to being able to be separated and pitted against each other. That's why there's such an opportunity today.
Thank you so much, Harley, for that. And if we listen critically to all that has been said, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming out to actually to note that it's all about understanding the status quo of international relations and also understand the resistance that is coming from the traditional powers towards the new or emerging powers, particularly from the global south. So what is the way forward? How can we thrive in this era of multipolarity and also reduce the negative consequences of such, because we are already seeing the resistance that is unavoidable at this particular moment, and that is why we want to again continue to look at the way forward with you, Mobley. How can we handle the global fragmentation that has been that is very evident along the lines of global governance, to actually give meaning to the governance theories that always say that power belongs to the people, because I think if we do not solve the fragmentation, it shows that just a collective view is actually at the helm of global governance, and that is why we see such negative ramifications, or many philanthropists of war across the globe.
Well, we've watched societies, cultures develop because of that exact analysis. They understand that power does emanate from the populace and the people. And whether you're looking at China or India or Russia or Brazil or Latin America or Africa for that matter, where you've seen the growth and development happen most quickly is not by money being transfused in by the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, or Western powers for that matter, but where power has grown from the organized people themselves. So people, organization, that dynamic has not changed in the last 200, 300, 400 years at least. And if Africa or other parts of the world are to be competitive in this new multipolar dynamic, it is going to be because they develop power centers. Africa has to recognize that the world is unipolar, or it is multipolar, I'm sorry, but Africa does not have to be multipolar. For example, Africa needs to be more power-centric among its own people who share in the African thought, the traditional, basic, foundational ideas of a culture that's ready to say, we have things in common first. Let's look at what we have in common, and then let's act in common accordingly. That is the preface that Africa is at right now, and Africa needs to recognize that it can take advantage of it, or it can allow it to be squandered and just etherealize into another several decades and centuries where Africa will be continuously exploited. I don't want to see that, because I'm African, and I understand that we have to assume our rightful place in the world, in the global structure, but we can't do that divided as we've been since, as Nkrumah said way back at Casablanca in 1958, we need to organize and we need to unite. When Africa can internalize that traditional idea, I think things will move forward very, very quickly for particularly Africa.
very imperative in the same perspective. We attempted to see that the existing governance structures or systems in Africa has actually promoted some sort of discrepancies or fragmentations, and this will come for us to analyze some of these internal problems which are actually a setback for Africa. If the continent, like you said, ultimately to benefit from the world of multipolarity, it is imperative to be united. So with the fragmentations, today we see countries across the continents still vying for independence, trying to be autonomous in every aspect. And we if we are taking an example of the situation in South Sudan, since 2011 that the country was granted its independence, the realities of today is actually sent the school of thought that said that giving independence to South Sudan was not an ideal thing to do because of the fragmentation that we have, and we still see some sort of internal diplomatic feuds across the African continent. Are we looking at the situation between the DRC and Rwanda, or even looking at Benin, Niger, and other countries along the lines of their borders? But then there is needs. If we are supposed to fix the ideology, Mr. EZENWA, there is need to fix ideology that aligns with a new governance system that will promote naturally the unification of the African continent internally, to be able to make it have its voice at the international stage. As a governance expert, what do you think are those parameters, or what is the scope for this change to come as soon as possible so that Africa can benefit largely from multilateralism?
Well, I think I've been battling with the challenge of definitions, and
absolutely,
yes, definition in the sense that I think the ideal is the multipolarism. I think I am inclined to engage in a way that shows that I am not on the privileged position of multipolarism. And CLARISSE, I've been stressing, and that is coming from a lot of conversations and travels across Africa. I see in very clear terms that sometimes there's a dissonance between the leaders and the people that they govern. Their aspirations, the aspirations of their leaders, the complexion, the character, the nature of the political elite of Africa are the same. The majority of their population is in very serious and dire situation. And so we first need to rework the feeling of freedom. When independence came in the 60s across most of African countries, the thinking was that there was going to be, like Samir Abil says, the linking. People would delink from the colonial thinking and begin to plan Africa in a way that works for majority. But that is not the current situation. It is still a situation in which the wealth, the resources of the continent is in the hand of a few people. And the language they speak is still the language of the oppressor. And so when we are talking multipolarism, it looks to me like a finesse, a beautiful concept that we will embrace in the future. But for today, I am more worried that the people who will come to this multipolar table are not prepared to assert themselves, and the only way they can do that is to have a situation in which they have relatively free fair, credible elections. They can have rule-based governance. They can have equal opportunity employment for majority of their citizens. And so when we have this kind of conversations, the majority of our people can connect with it. If that doesn't happen within Africa, our conversation will be academic and it will be running over the head of majority of our people. So I want an Africa that can play its role effectively because the people of Africa are strong and can contribute to this multipolar conversation. Last few years, I think that was 2020 or 2021, we had this meeting in John Hopkins University, and the facilitator was asking those of us from Nigeria that what do we think about the Chinese imperialism that is eating into our country, and there was a lot of conversation around that.
Yeah.
And I asked him, what's the difference between Chinese imperialism and American imperialism? There is no difference. It's simply that you are worried about China. Majority of our people are more worried about Western American imperialism than we are worried about the Chinese. But whether it is Chinese or American imperialism, what is important is that Africa is the center of their play. And we cannot make our place where people come to play and whatever benevolent pretensions that they have, until we build the capacity of our people to come to this multipolar world with the same strength, with the same capacity, we will be having an academic conversation.
And that is why it is imperative for Mr. EZENWA to discuss governance, because whatever has to happen, it should be embedded in the leadership or the governance structure of the entire African continent. And it is said actually, you quite mentioned earlier on that when you are being invited, you ensure that you go with some value, and that is why this platform has been put together to widen the horizon, to call people into understanding the realities of the world, because it is difficult to benefit from a situation or from a system which you do not really understand. Of course, the key terms are multipolarity, multilateralism, and then to be able to benefit, there is need to create that competitive edge or advantage for your people, and which is still embedded in governance. And I think the countries, that's why the world largely has rallied behind the new perspective coming from the global south, or particularly BRICS nations, to understand the alternative of ideologies to be able to fit in the new structure and reality of the world, so that at the end, like you said, Africa will not feel cheated, or any country again will not feel cheated. And to be able to do this, it brings us again now to understanding the place of public policy in ensuring of that the governance structure is being assimilated or understood, that meets the dictates of the current society. With you, HARLEY SCHLANGER, what do you think can be the basis of the policy or public policy of nations championing the new narratives that will help to continue to widen horizons and change mentality towards the global setting in line with governance?
Well, first of all, what's necessary is to take a diplomatic approach to this.
Okay.
And the African countries have been left out of that for most of the last 500 years. They've been told what to do, whether they like it or not. They're not invited into the discussion. And I think what we're seeing now is a number of countries are coming up with development policies, ideas for development. We just saw the opening of the great dam in Ethiopia, for example.
Absolutely.
There's the need to deal with the shrinking of Lake Chad, and there are a number of ideas for that. There are plenty of ideas for development, many of them in the 2063 program. But now we have leaders in the world who recognize that Africa is not just a place you go to steal raw materials and labor, but that African nations are becoming mature, but it's still a process. Now, the big advantage that we have in the world today is leaders like Putin and Xi and Modi, who I would say are head and shoulders above the leaders in the West. The leaders in the West, for the most part, have been selected because of their relationship to the establishment, especially to the banks. Look, Merz, the new Chancellor of Germany, was the head of BlackRock in Germany. Macron, before he became president, was working for the Rothschild Bank in France. And you have these bankers who are interested in money for themselves, greed, as opposed to leaders, I think, who are beginning to emerge, who recognize that that's a dead end. So I think the most important thing is for the development of a younger generation of leaders in Africa who can be involved in discussions with Putin, with Xi, with leaders of the BRICS. And to me, the BRICS is not a universal solution. It's a process. And it's this development process which is so important. And to be a part of that is the way that Africa can change. And from people I know, younger leaders in Africa, this is what they want. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be part of the process. And this is a real change. And I think the institutional framework for this is now available. And it's going to be a fight, because you have to realize, as we've been saying, the Western imperial powers are not going to give up their privilege, but they're losing it because of their own stupidity and greed. And that's why there's an opportunity right now, but we have to make sure that it's not we don't copy the model of the West. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we look at the way China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty. Sure. It can work.
Indeed, it can work if major stakeholders or decision-making body is more intentional, and if they have understood the major stakes involved in governance in multipolarity. Actually, he's joining us at the concluding phase. We're going to Ghana to get the viewpoint of Mr. KOFI, who is joining us from Ghana, President CCLG-AFRICA Ghana EPA-NAP Project Ambassador. You are welcome to the program. We're almost culminating, and so we are in the phase of recommendations. Let's take this question, an example coming from the President of Ghana. Lately, we saw that President John Dramani Mahama launched a book that actually outlined the key performance indicators for Ghanaian diplomacy, both internally and externally. And it brings us now to how the governance, this is going to affect the governance structure of Ghanaians for the benefits of Ghana, for the benefits of Ghanaians in the era of multipolarity.
Yes, my dear. Thank you very much. And let me just say that I'm sorry for joining in late. There are other meetings that I have to be on. Okay. And so forgive me for joining in late. And I hope you can hear me clearly.
Absolutely. We can.
Okay. All right. So let me first of all...
Okay, we'll see your face for a while.
Please, can you mute yourself, please? Okay. Go on.
Okay. All right. So yes, indeed, when it comes to issues of multipolarity, I think it is doable, as your topic is talking about. It's very doable. And indeed, as you indicated, recently the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, came out with what we call performance indicators. He launched a book to say the key performance indicators are that as a country, we're making sure that our heads of missions in Ghana and elsewhere, there should be some kind of performance indicators for that. That will make sure that they are able to work as diplomats, and also to make sure that they are able to put things in place that will promote investment, enhance trade, support diaspora and engagement with other people, and then secure scholarship and also boost tourism. These were the key areas that the president launched the book. And if we all know, he has been a president before, so he understands the issues better. So coming out with these key indicators, we believe that it's going to help to put things in proper perspective. Because when you look at Africa, we are far behind. And for me, I think I heard an earlier speaker indicating that we should have our own way of doing our own things. And I believe that, because if we don't set that standard for ourselves and we want to copy, we won't get to wherever we are, because China decide to do it on their own way, and they are where they are. So Africans must also take the bold step to make sure that what we want, what are the things that we want to set for ourselves. So for me, these key indicators that His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, have set, I think it's in the right direction. And if all of us will go by that and work towards that, I think it will really help us and liberate Africa, for that matter, starting from Ghana, from the challenges and the difficulties that we find ourselves. Most of the time, we do not monitor progress, we do not monitor indicators, we do not evaluate them, we do not make sure that we are able to function properly as far as all the indicators are concerned. But I believe strongly that as a former president coming back to power again, he will be able to learn from mistakes that probably he must have done, and then also correct those mistakes and make sure that he's able to leave a legacy before his tenure as a president expires. Okay. So, my dear, I am of opinion that Africans, and for that matter, Ghanaians, must have our own way of thinking. We must really look into ourselves, our culture setup. What can we do to make sure that our people can understand us better? Because we are copying, as I've been indicating, we have been copying too much. We copy the European style, we copy American style, and that is not helping us. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to be with the courtesy call that was made by the delegate from the United Kingdom, or call on the Speaker of Parliament of Ghana. And, at one of the discussions that we're having, the Speaker of Parliament indicated that Ghana have a hybrid democracy that we are practicing. We have the British type and then the American system, which is not helping us at all. But for Ghana, and for that matter, Africans, what kind of democracy that will be good for us? What are we practicing? It looks like we are confused. And once we are confused, it becomes very difficult for us to really get the agenda right. So, my dear, for me, I've said that let's sit down as Africans and look at what will help us. Let's sit down as African and come out with, these key indicators. And then I believe we can do it, because the African brain is sharp. If you give the African opportunity, it's able to excel. And once we know we can excel, I think we can do it. And I am challenging all African heads. I'm challenging all powers that be in Africa, that until we realize that we can do it, we will continue to be where we find ourselves. So for me, let's continue to make sure that Africans themselves become proud of themselves. Africans themselves know what they are about. We set these priorities and we are able to make sure that we work towards to the end of it. So for me, we should not believe the argument, but rather we should make sure that we take pragmatic steps to be able to solve this issue too, when you talk of multipolarity. Thank you.
You all, Mr. KOFI. While talking about the existing systems of democracy, which is problematic in Africa, it brings us again to the constitutions, because when in terms of governance and the constitution, you see that majority of constitutions across the African continent were written in line with the dictates from the former colonial powers. Today we are in the 21st century, facing new realities. So, and then when you see constitutional amendments, majority across Africa is usually centered about giving a head of states more impetus or more relevance in terms of seeking re-elections. So how can we, is it proper to advocate for reviewing constitutional changes along the governance system in Africa that will now suit the revolutionized African mindset for the benefit of the continent as a whole in the sphere of multipolarity, because we are very conversant that be it nations in the BRICS, they have a holistic approach of an organization, but there is also that interest that suits countries individually, and Africa can't be lacking such a competitive edge. What is the way forward?
Yeah, I think you said it right. I think we should have constitutional reviews and look into ourselves, what we can do for ourselves, okay? And that would be the way forward for us in the first step. And then let's change our mindset, our way of thinking, our way of doing things. We are African, whether you like it or not, we are Africans. And we cannot be doing things like Europeans. Of course, we are all human beings anyway. But then what can we do? Because I've indicated, like, they're copying the thing. I mean, we're copying their lifestyle and everything that they are doing. That is what we as Africans are doing. So first and foremost, like indicated, we should have a constitutional review. All African countries must have a constitutional review and understand that our way of democracy, in fact, if you come to most of African countries, for instance, in Ghana, we have the chiefs that rules before democracy came to Africa, and for that matter in Ghana. The chiefs are able to rule our people well, and they will become good leaders. It's a matter of education. Once you're able to be educated well and understand the issues and the concept very well, we'll be able to rule and rule very well. So for me, let's as Africans come back to the table, drawing board, and give ourselves time. Let's set up agenda. It could be the next 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years, or 50 years. We're talking about AU 2060. What are we making sure that we are able to, meet these targets? It's none. So we as Africans, at times, I feel like we do not know exactly what we are about. That is, I'm sorry to say that, but I feel like we do not know what we are about. Leadership is a problem. And once leaders get it right, all of us will be able to get it right. Citizens must change their mind. Citizens must understand that no one can build Africa for us except ourselves. Leaders must understand that they should be accountable when they are put into high office. Leaders must understand that the people put you there for you to, support them to rule, to make sure that their needs and wants are well met for them. And those are the things we need to look at. Whether it's a party, democracy, it's whatever it is, let's look at what will suit us. Of course, I understand that, when you talk of democracy, there are pillars that you say, yes, when you are practicing is democracy. But then we as Africans, what do we want? And that's the question that we should be asking ourselves. And until we ask ourselves that question, we won't be able to get to wherever we want to get to. Thank you.
We've lost Mr. KOFI's audio.
Okay. Go ahead, MOBLEY. Go ahead.
4 minutes, we didn't get a chance to hear the completion of his statement, but I think that in terms of the multi-polar conversation that we're generally trying to articulate here, it is, again, an amazing opportunity for the world and for Africa especially because it gives Africa some room to make some critical decisions about how Africa is going to go forward. We have certainly corporations, international corporations, multinational corporations have been talked about for many years and many centuries and decades. They are the principal drivers of what happens from the Western countries in particular, and to a lesser degree, but to a nationalistic degree when you start talking about China and Russia. But the drivers and the wild card elements are the corporations. They each want to do what they want to do in the world throughout colonies and former colonies, and they want to be able to move freely. And they can do that as long as they have the financial controls to be able to give benefits and extract benefits, impose sanctions, or make things easy for various institutions and countries along the way. So they really pull the strings. We talk a lot about what power we have as one country or another, but it's really the corporations that are the drivers. Whether we're talking about 50 years ago when IBM largest contract was the pass law system in South Africa, or you're talking about today where Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg control how we communicate throughout the world. These structures are developed by corporations. It's not a national policy. It's one's national policy, but it is a cooperative effort that was launched by these companies. So we can't talk about multipolarization or multipolarism without including the power of these corporations and the influence of these corporations. These corporations also have the ability to enforce their power. They can move armies, and we've seen it. We've seen them move entire war projects throughout the world because they want to see certain outcomes. Africa is still in a very vulnerable position and very vulnerable to that kind of activity. There is no way that Togo and Benin and Malawi should be trying to negotiate contracts with China and the United States. It's a non-competitive situation. When we talk about multipolarism, we're not talking about it to that extent. If you are, it is a very fragmented and losing proposition for those smaller countries. There has to be some consolidation. There has to be some rebranding and redevelopment, reinfusion, if you will, of African thought, so that we can reconstitute what Africa can be. Africa has the resources that the world needs. I mean, still 35 of the, I believe it is 40, I'm sorry, just wanted to kind of flash back. I haven't used these figures in a while, but it's about 25 of the 36 elements that are necessary to drive any industrialized society are only found in Africa, and they have a preponderance of the rest of those mineral elements to contribute. 40% of the gold reserves of the world are in Africa. Africa can move in a distinctly different direction, and as I said earlier, command more of a presence at the international table of nations, but it has to do so in a consolidated way. So.
It's about having an agenda for the multipolar world, and I think the agenda is supposed to be underlined in the governance structure that meets present times. Concluding phase with you, HARLEY SCHLANGER. What is the future outlook, and of course a phase that highlights maybe some of emerging trends that will have to alter the global governance structure that we find in today's world?
Well, let me just follow up what Arthur was saying about the problem of corporations.
Yeah.
What my organization, the Schiller Institute, is doing is trying to mobilize in the United States to take away the power of these corporations by having the people find their voice and not be so passive when you have corporate control. And what I mean by that is very simple. The United States, instead of being prepared to go to war against Russia, go to war against China, threaten India, the United States policy should be very different. It should be to collaborate and cooperate with the BRICS countries and also with Africa, and to allow the idea that the continent of Africa is the future. You know, I think the population figures, the expectations is that Africa will have, actually 2 billion people, 3 billion people in the not too distant future, and will be a new center of international trade and commerce.
Absolutely.
And so that's the thing we have to orient toward in the United States, to take the power away from these powerful, too big to fail banks that are going to fail anyway. And for me, a democratization in the United States is one of the most important things that has to be done.
Thank you so much, HARLEY SCHLANGER, International Spokesperson, Schiller Institute. And the way forward with you, Mr. EZENWA, let's look at from the analysis that have been presented, we see that Africa is a major player here. I want to use the words of Andrei Gromov, a Russian who said that the future starts now. And it is imperative for Africa, knowing that it represents a major player in global transformations and multilateral global transformation. It is imperative to identify the key indicators of that will make it thrive. Now, the question is, you're concluding phase should be coming. So, are we of the view that governance will thrive in Africa when political tactics change practically and push Africans into understanding the prime core, like what has to be prevented or preserved to be able to thrive in a multipolar system? You're muted, please.
Okay, Clarisse, if you can hear me.
I can hear you now.
I think that when we were in the university, if you can hear me, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. Go ahead, please.
If yes, you can hear me, when we were in the university, there were people that we used to, there's a way people behave, and we call them agents of IMF and the World Bank, which means the World Bank, the Bretton Woods institutions, and what you call the international finance capital used to have agents. But today, in the national planning ministries and departments of most of African countries, the IMF folks and the World Bank folks have a seat in the national planning, offices of most of African countries. Mm-hmm. We need to eject them. We need to throw them out, and so that our people can plan for their own people without these folks breathing over their necks. And that's the way we can play better role in the multipolar, a place that we are moving to. And the cooperation within the BRICS, the cooperation within Africa, as Otto kept talking about, is important. We need to consolidate our relationship. We must break down the walls. These boundaries need to be cleaned out in a way that if I want to go to Sierra Leone, I don't have to, I can I can fly straight. It's just recently, before, if you're going to most of African countries, you have to go to Europe and turn back. I think those things are we need to take away all the visa restrictions so that we can cooperate effectively. Trade within Africa is important, and that will help us to play bigger and better role in the emerging multipolar world that is, whether we like it or not, has come upon us and is irresistible.
Actually, it's a reality, and of course, there is need to master the dynamics of multipolarity so that tomorrow we'll not keep calling for reparations in the second phase of reparations, but then understand the game of diplomacy to actually position Africa a major player. With you, concluding statement, Mr. KOFI, the way forward, not just for Africa, but for emerging global powers, writing a new status